Welcome to large file uploads with Amazon S3 and Django. This is going off of the guide on cur.co/E1133T. So this guide will actually show you everything that you need to do step by step to get Amazon S3 working with Django file uploads through Ajax with jQuery. Now, if all of that sounds confusing to you, then this might be a little bit more advanced for you. So I wouldn't recommend this for you if that is too advanced. But if it all sounds good, then let's keep going. Now, I will say that this is different than our S3 static and media files for Django guide. It's similar, but it's different. This is going to be completely outside the context of that. And in fact, we're not even using the file field inside of Django for these files. We're going to be doing it a little bit differently, and you'll see why later. So the initial thing we have to do is set up Amazon S3. Now, this guide won't work for other services. I mean, unless they're set up exactly like Amazon S3, it just won't. And the reason for the selection of Amazon S3 has to do with cost effectiveness as well as just general setup effectiveness. It's very, very effective to use Amazon S3, and it's pretty inexpensive. So that's why we're using this. I mean, it's what we use on codingforentrepreneurs.com. This is how we serve all of our downloads, is through Amazon S3. And it's how millions of other files are downloaded every day. So using S3 is definitely a really good way to go about doing this. And that's the way we're going to be setting up. So one thing about this guide is, even though it is step-by-step, every once in a while we miss something or there's just some ambiguous thing about it. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them on the guide. That way we can have it all in one place and everybody else can benefit as well if we find some of those solutions. And if they're major solutions, we will put them actually in the guide. So we will try to update this guide to make it last as long as possible. And that's why this guide's really thorough. And that's why this series is a little bit longer too, is because we are going to be going through everything step by step so you can see how it's done. The one thing that we're not going to do is actually set up our Django project. In fact, what we're going to be going off of is this create blank Django project portion here. But before we jump into Django, let's actually set up our AWS stuff. So I'm going to just break down the guide here just a little bit so I can have AWS open next to it. So I already have AWS logged in, and if you don't have a AWS account, go to cur.co/EQ6K6G. That will actually take you to the console. You can sign up for a new account and do all that. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is create an S3 bucket. So that means that I'm going to go into services and look for S3. I can also just type out S3 and it's likely going to find it for me. So this is going to direct me to that S3 page. This is the S3 management console, right? In my case, I have one bucket because we did some tests on this before. You might have none, or you might have a lot. But we're going to be creating a bucket specific to what we're doing here. So I'm going to create a bucket, and I'm going off of the guide, so I'm going to do CFE awesome bucket. Okay, my region, I'm sticking at US West in Oregon, like it says in the guide, but I want to take note of the region up here. So it says region equal to US-West-2. That is important. Yours might be different. Default, I would say go off of the region you're going with. So US West 2 is this, and that's the actual URL slug that we're going to want to use in the future. So those two things are important. So take note of them. Now, if you are using US West, you're going to be following along with us almost identical here. We will mention that again, but definitely take note of these settings because we will use them later. I'll hit next. You probably won't be able to use the same bucket name as me because I just claimed it. And then I'll hit next again. I can go off of all the defaults, including the permissions, and just create the bucket. So now that the bucket is here, we have to do some things to it, and that is adding in some permissions. So I'm going to select the bucket and go to permissions, go to cores configuration, and I'm actually going to copy and paste the one from the guide. Paste that in there, and we'll hit save. Okay. no errors happen. So if errors happen, please let us know in those comments. But likely they won't happen. So that's pretty much all we have to do for the bucket itself. Like, I don't have to change a whole lot more. But what I have to do now is create a policy that allows any given user to upload to this bucket. Now, this is different than we've done before. So creating this policy means that we can actually add people to this policy by way of a group. We'll see what that means in just a moment. So instead of making a policy that goes to one individual user, we're going to make a policy that goes to one individual group, and then we can add users to that group as we see fit, add or subtract users to that group, that is. So I'm going to go back into my home console, and I'll just type AIM, and I'm going to click on that, and it's going to take me to these general AIM settings. It might ask you to redirect. You can ignore it, but basically I'm going to click on policies here, and then I'm going to go ahead and create policy, and then go to create your own policy, select that, and we now have some policy stuff. So I already have this data pre-filled for us, and you don't have to actually add a description, I don't think. But then the main thing is the actual policy document. So just copying this policy document example, I'm going to actually just copy the example here and paste in and point out a few things. CFE awesome bucket, that is the S3 bucket that I created up here, right? So it's going off of that actual name. So you're going to want to replace my CFE awesome bucket with those there. Now, of course, the format is actually inside of the guide too. So if I just went in this guide here and copied and pasted that, I see that bucket right here. So I just replace this with CFE awesome bucket, right? So that's what I'll do. Okay, so there it is right there. I'm going to go ahead and validate the policy first, make sure it's working. Policy is valid. Go ahead and create it. So we can actually talk about a few things. So here we go. So in here, I get a error in my actual description. So I'm just going to get rid of the description in general. I'll hit validate and create the policy. And it's working, but I will describe this policy in just a second. Let's go ahead and get rid of all things in there, validate the policy, create it, and there, my description's gone. I had some issues in that description. That's okay. So I created that policy. I can actually go in this search and do CFE awesome, click on it, and we're going to take a look at this policy just to kind of make sure that it's working. So I'm going to go ahead and hit edit policy. It's giving me a issue here. And after I refreshed, I was able to pull up the policy again. So there's actually no issue with this policy. Now, first and foremost, this is basically saying, hey, list bucket, get bucket items for that resource, and then actually do things to that bucket down here. That's essentially what that policy is. You could use other policies. You could use like just their built-in policies. So if we go back and click on policies and did something like S3, you get something like S3 full access. Now, this is fine. You could totally do that and it would absolutely work. But with our CFE awesome bucket S3 policy, what that allows is it's restricting the actual bucket that it can be used. Again, you may have seen this already, but we're just making sure that you understand that these policies are important for when you're using other developers. So the next thing is I can create a group. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to create a group, and I'm going to call this group name CFE _ awesome group. And I'll hit next step. And I'm going to attach that policy that I just created. So let's filter it down, CFE awesome. And I'm getting no policies found here. So I misspelled awesome. That's probably why, and that's it. So I'm going to go ahead and select this policy, hit next step, and create group. So this group has no users in it, but it is a group that has that policy attached. So that means when I create a new user and put them into this group, they automatically get that policy. So the next step then is to create that user. So go into users here, I'll go to add user, and I'm going to say CFE _ user Justin, and I'm going to give programmatic access. That is the key one here. The management console access, you can do that if you want. In this case, I didn't actually set up any permissions for that, so I'm just going to do the programmatic access. This is going to allow this user to actually upload specifically to that bucket. I'll go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to add user to group. Again, we can attach policies directly to it, and we can even do that one we just created. But again, I want it in that group. So I'm going to select that group, go down to next and review, and we've got my CFE underscore user underscore Justin. Inside of that group, I'm going to go ahead and create that user. And this is going to allow so many great things for us as far as permissions are concerned. Like if you had a team, for example, and you wanted all the team to have the same access to the one single place, you just add them to this group and they do. Now, if you get rid of someone from that team, you just remove them from that group. That is something else that's really cool about this. All right, so now I've got these credentials. I'm going to go ahead and download the CSV file, and I'm going to go ahead and open it up just to make note of a few things with it. In my case, it's looking like it's wanting to open up numbers, so I'm actually going to skip that for just a moment, and instead I'm going to open it up with Sublime Text. Okay, so Sublime Text, of course, is that text editor that we're going to be using, and it's giving us a few things here. So I'm going to just separate these out so you can see them. So we'll say username is, of course, that user we just created. And then the next comma is for the password, which we don't need because it's blank anyway. So access key ID is equal to that. And then the secret key is the next one. And then everything else we can just kind of ignore. Okay. So you just want to make note of these things and make sure that you've got yours, right? Yours are going to be different, but they will be there and they will actually work. Something you should note is, of course, if you've created the same group name as well as the same username, it's probably going to work for you. It's just really that bucket name that you can't have the same bucket as me. That's really it. So I'm going to go ahead and close it, and we're getting some timeout errors that might be related to our connection right now, but overall, we've got our user here. It's just created, and we have all the things that we need. So as we see on the left-hand side here, we've compiled these users. Well, there's a few things that we still haven't compiled. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this right here, and I'm going to go back into Sublime Text where I put these things and just replace some stuff. So CFE upload username, that is my CFE user right there. And this, my region is right. The access key is incorrect. And then the secret key is going here. So we'll replace this. And then CFE awesome bucket is actually my bucket. That's also my group and my US West. So some of these things we won't really need in the future, but it's nice to know the settings for this particular user. Now, again, I have it still in this CSV file. This is not actually a valid CSV file, so I will save it as something different. And we'll just do save as, and I'm going to go into my project, which we'll talk about in just a moment as to where it is and whatnot, but I'll just do credentials.txt or rather credentials.py, and I'm just going to leave it right there in the project for now. So this is all valid actual Python code that we will be implementing. So the next step is actually adding this into our Django configuration, which is something we'll do in just a moment. But if you have any questions on the AWS stuff, please let us know on that guide so we can address it. So just a little bit ago, we set up our credentials to be ready to be used in our Django project. So now what we're going to do is actually create a blank Django project to work with those credentials. I realized earlier in the video you saw that, yeah, we already have a project set up. But in this case, I'm actually going to show you a way to shortcut creating that exact project. And I actually recommend that you work in this blank project that we are going to be working in, because then you can use it as reference going forward. And then it's this one sole project that ideally works for now and in the future as well. So let's go ahead and get that started. Of course, obviously, I assume that you already work with Django and you can already do a lot of these things that we're at. But the main thing here is I'm going to be in my dev folder. So I'm inside of dev. And I already have this Django S3 upload folder, as you saw before, probably. What I'm going to do now is do make dir CFE S3 upload. and I'm going to change into CFE S3 upload. Now, inside of this project, or actually the guide, we don't really go over that a whole lot. I mean, we might have it somewhere in there, but realistically, this is just about adding this to any sort of project as the text guide is concerned. But with the video, we can give a little bit more context, and that's kind of the point. So now that we're in here, we're going to make our virtual env, and I'm using Python 3 inside of this particular folder. It's going to download and install all the virtual environment stuff, of course. We're going to activate it, and I'll do pip freeze. I should see nothing. So what I'm going to do is pip install CFE. Once I get CFE, right now I'm using version 0.0.3. But what that does is it installs some Django stuff as well as the Django REST framework. And it pretty much gets us ready to build a blank project. And all I have to do is CFE --new, and that will actually go to Git, grab our Django project, and bring it back. Of course, if you don't have Git installed, there's going to be some errors there. Now, if you want to take the long way, you could just check out that guide, and you'll actually be able to do everything we just did. Now I have this folder called backend, so if I go to cd backend, this is my actual Django project that we're going to be working in. So since I've got this, I'm going to add this project into my Sublime text. So I'm going to go ahead and go save project as, and we're going to go into dev, and then we'll do CFE S3 upload, and this is going to be CFE S3 upload, and then we're going to do project, add folder to project, and then again, CFE S3 upload. And there we go. And then these credentials, I'm going to go ahead and copy them and go into the backend. And then src, I'm going to make a new folder in here called credentials.py and save those in. And now I'm going to go ahead and close out the other one. And we have our Django project pretty much up there and going. Actually, I have credentials in the wrong place, so let's just move it over into actual CFE home. So again, this is everything from that blank project. So if we look in here, we see everything that would have come from that blank Django project guide, and that's the purpose of that CFE command line interface. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it right now. We do plan on doing more with that, so let us know in the comments if you want to learn more of it. So now that we've got this blank Django project, let's go ahead and actually do the work. We'll go ahead and do pip install, and I'm going to install all of these things. Paste that in there. All right, so as that's loading, I see that it says install Django REST framework. I actually already have the Django REST framework installed. If you look at the requirements of the project itself, doesn't have it, but the CFE guide or the CFE installation does. So if I do pip freeze, I'll see that the CFE already installed Django REST framework, so I don't really need to worry about that. But I actually do need to update my settings files. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on each one. So REST framework right in here. And this is actually important for this project. So you do want to have the REST framework. You don't have to do it this way, but it makes things a lot easier for us. Okay, so now that I have my settings installed, I'm going to go ahead and just run into source python manage.py, migrate, and I'm going to go ahead and create my super user. Obviously, you can write whatever you like here. I'm going to use CFE and just a whatever password right now. Okay, so I've got my super user in here, and I have the next portion ready. So step 3, we're going to create the files app. Really simple. Python. It's python manage.py start app, not create app. That will be updated. Okay, so now that we've got that, we look inside of the files app here. Before I jump in there, I will add it into our installed apps, just kind of preemptively doing it. I know that this is coming, so I might as well just do it. Usually whenever you start a new app, you put it right inside of installed apps, or you'd have it pretty much ready to go. But in our case, we know we're creating a model because that's next. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, and we're going to paste it in here. I'll explain these things in just a moment. And then as we see, files app, and then we have the config AWS.py. So we actually changed it to being config.aws.py, and we actually put it inside of the Files app. I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'll cut this one out. Inside of Files, I'll say config aws.py, paste that in there, and there we go. So as I see here, I have my files.views. You don't have to do it this way, but I did specifically to make it easier on us within that one single app, so you can move this with different projects. So the other credentials file, just going to go ahead and delete it, and I'm going to close out this other one and just hit no on saving. Okay, so yeah, we moved those credentials files around a lot. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this file item here. So what this is really just a database entry where we're going to associate it to a user, so any given user that's actually logged in. We're going to give the file a name, so we'll actually have some way to name the file. We're going to also allow for a path that is an upload path specifically for this file as well. Something I'm going to add here is just say blank equals to true and null equals to true. Only for the purposes of this example. You might upgrade and change it later, but I just wanted to make sure that we make this nice and easy on us. So make migrations, and we want to do an import here. So from Django.conf import settings. We need that settings module in there. Make migrations again, and Python manage.py migrate. So the main things here are really the name and the path. These other things can be ignored. But they're really there for, if you want the file type, whatever it is, like a MP3 or a document, timestamp and updated, just general date time stuff. And then whether or not it's finished uploaded, that's probably something we'll cover. And then also whether or not this file should be considered active. This is more Django related rather than S3 related. Okay, so that is the model. Again, we're uploading directly to a path. So we will have a path inside of our bucket, right? So we've got our bucket right here. There is a path that will be inside of there. So we'll see what that does in a moment, but basically this is going to be that path that's inside that bucket to that file. It is different than the file field, and yes, there's probably a way to do this with the file field, but I found that I liked using the path so I can, understand the structure of the Django, or excuse me, the AWS bucket better by just looking at these paths. Again, that actually is probably confusing. So let's actually start getting into an example. So what I want to do now is create my view, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this entire block of code here. So on this doc, what we're doing here is actually creating a policy that allows us to upload it. It's essentially like creating credentials to allow us to upload directly to AWS. We give some additional context in the code itself, but the path thing that I was talking about is this right here. So essentially, we're going to upload it to a bucket. We're going to upload it to that specific user that would be related here. And then we're going to give the file name. So we're actually grabbing the file name. Whatever the file name would be, or excuse me, not the file name, but the file ID. We don't actually give the file name. Now, the reason for this is because of how downloading these files may be, and also to ensure that we aren't accidentally having spaces where we shouldn't. Essentially, we're renaming the file just by its ID, so we're not causing it any future issues that, frankly, are a little hard to diagnose. So basically, I just wanted to rename all of the files to something that's unique, which would be the file ID. And it's also very specific to that file, again, the file ID. Now, you don't have to do it this way, but I'm doing it this way because it makes the most sense, in my opinion. Now, the next thing you see here is we have this file policy API, but I have a post request. So I'm actually generating not only the policy, but also the file item itself when I get that policy. Now, the reason for this has to do with how the policy works, or how we're uploading to the policy. So our actual file path, where it's going, is related off of a Django database entry. So basically, like if I'm going to upload a file, I could upload some random file and then upload it to my AWS, but then I'm not controlling this path as much, right? So in order for me to control this path, in the way I want it to be, I have to create a object ID, or actually create an object first, create that path first, and then finally do the uploading process after all the path and the object is created in Django. Something else that's really nice about this is what that means is I can actually set the path, and then once it's done uploading, I can mark the Boolean of upload actually completed. So that's the other portion of this. Other than that, I mean, if you go through this, it's fairly straightforward as to what it is. This policy document stuff, this is just really building the policy that AWS will accept. Now, these things are tried and true. Like, I've used it a lot. So if you have any issues with it, please let us know in the comments here, which you won't even find out those issues until we actually put this policy into effect, which I'm not going to worry about just yet. But I now have this view, so let's go ahead and create a urls.py file here inside of files. Well, you could put it inside of just urls.py, so let's actually just stick with the document here. I'm going to go ahead and bring it in as files.views, file policy URL or API, and let's go ahead and create that URL here. So this is, of course, that API endpoint that is actually going to be handling the method of post, so we can actually get it, right? And we definitely want to use a post method to create anything, right? So in this case, we actually are creating an object. So we're using post to create that object. And then from there, we're actually generating the file policy. I will say one caveat. You can create this policy and use this exact same policy without creating the file object itself. But you're going to have to change how your upload start paths work. So in our case, our upload start path is that. Okay. So now, let's go ahead and create some stuff for our templates. I'm going to go ahead inside of SRC. I'm going to make a new folder in here, and I'll go to templates, and then inside of here, we're going to just do base.html, and I'm going to copy all of this base file document stuff in. Now, you can have additional styling. We're not going to really worry about styling right now, but basically you want to make sure you get a JavaScript or a jQuery version that has Ajax in it, such as jQuery.slim does not have Ajax. It actually removes Ajax from the package. You want to make sure you get a jQuery that has that Ajax package, because we will absolutely 100% need it. Now, again, in our templates, I'm going to make another file here called upload.html, and we are just going to grab this right here and paste it in. So I've got my upload.html in here. And then what I want to do, something that we're going to go back in with the guide, is up here. We skipped over this upload URL portion. So let's go ahead and bring that in. I'm going to just import my template view here. And bring in this URL upload. So it's really just rendering out upload.html. It's not rendering anything fancy or new here, just rendering an HTML document. And since we've got that, we want to make sure that we have our templates actually set up, our template directory. I actually don't. So ospath.join, and that is base dir as well as templates. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this and bring it into local. This is a lot of sort of basic setup stuff, but we're just going to make sure it's all in there. And I'm also going to make sure that db.sqlite3 is on the same path as manage.py. Otherwise, I set these things up incorrectly. So now that this is working, let's go ahead and see and make sure that everything is set up for our project. And I'll just go ahead and do python manage.py, run server. And I'm getting an invalid keyword, probably something with our URL. Yeah, as view should not be that, but rather not name, but template name. Okay, let's try that again. Run server. Server's running just fine. Let's go into our server, and we're going to go into upload. Let's just make sure we don't have any syntax errors. Everything looks fine. I opened up the console. All of that stuff's good. So I think that our Django project is set up. Some of the copy and paste errors that you see in the video won't be on this guide because I'll update it in just a moment. So stick with us because the next part is doing the jQuery configuration, or actually running the jQuery stuff. I mean, if you want, you can actually go ahead and literally copy and paste this code into a jQuery document and have it upload and see how it works. But we're actually going to do it in the video in the next one, and probably in a minute, and probably just give additional context to that jQuery stuff as well. So stay with us. So now what it's time to do is actually set up our jQuery. So of course you can just copy and paste this jQuery code, but before we do that, I'm actually going to make sure that our API is working. So let's go into Sublime Text and look at our API endpoint for that file policy. I'm going to go ahead and copy this and just paste it in here, hit enter, and I'm going to just test this out a little bit. I'm going to pass in an empty dictionary here for content, hit post, and I get this message, a file name is required. Well, that's a good thing. So let's go ahead and try it with the file name. I'll just put double quotes, file name, double quotes, colon, and some file-test.mp4. And so that's the format right there. Stick with that format. Okay, so now that we've got that, I'm going to go ahead and post it. And there we go. So we actually created a file that's saved in our database. We have our file bucket path as in where it's going to end up being. The file name, notice it's renamed to 8.mp4. And this file probably even has its own name. So let's go ahead and go into the admin. And in the guide, we actually kind of skip over adding this into the admin, but it's right there. That's how you do it. So now that's in the admin, let's go ahead and click on this. I click on this here. I see that I've got my name. I've got a path. I don't have a size or a file type, but I do have the name and path, the critical things. So this is where it's going to end up being. Now, it's not there yet, right? We actually haven't uploaded anything just yet. So we actually have to update our upload method, right? So upload right here, I actually have to make some changes here. So what I'm going to do is actually copy all of this code and just try it out. So I'll just copy it out. And there we go. So we got it copied. I mean, the video might be different than what's actually on the guide. So definitely copy with what's on the guide. Inside of upload.html, or actually rather inside of base.html, I'm going to make a new block in here. This is merely for testing purposes. It's not meant to be a long-term solution. And I'm going to call it block.js or block JavaScript. Okay, so we're putting our actual JavaScript inside of that block. So inside of upload, I'll do block JavaScript again, paste all that in, and then put in block there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save it, and I'm going to refresh in here now. And it looks like I've got a couple block tags that weren't finished off. That one is working fine. Let's go ahead and double check. Oh, there we go. On our base, we didn't have it blocked out. All right, so let's also open up the JavaScript console under View, Developer, and JavaScript console, or of course, Alt-Command-J, that opens and closes it. So now I'm actually going to test out this upload. I'm going to click on Choose Files, and I'm going to go ahead and make a couple screenshots here. There's one, and there's two. So right underneath here, I have two screenshots. I actually have a few, so I'm going to go ahead and try those out. Hit Upload, and it's actually uploading these items. As we see, it says completed down here. So I actually did upload those to S3, or at least I think that I did. I do have some extra features on here that I actually haven't implemented here in this actual code, but we'll talk about that in just a moment. Let's go ahead and jump into our AWS console, and more specifically into Amazon S3. Of course, inside of our bucket here, we've got our user here. So this was created, as you see. And then I have some items in here. I actually have some uploaded items. Now, to test which one's which, I can just select any of them, and I see that that says 11. This one says 8. So let's go ahead and look at the one that says 14. That would be our most recent one, or that last one that we are uploading. So I just go ahead and select this, and I'm going to click on the link itself. Notice the direct link to it with the path and everything does not allow you to see it. So access is denied. So these are protected files. So you need an actual signing key to open and download it. As you see right here, this is all signed, but there's the images. That's actually on AWS. So the upload portion is still working, or it is actually working. Now inside of this configuration, let's actually go through it. I'm going to open this up a little bit and we'll look at this JavaScript or this jQuery code here. That's actually what it's doing. Now, first and foremost, we have this selector that's going to be looking for the file upload field. So that file upload field is, if we go into upload.html, it's this right here. So this is the class that it's looking for. So when it changes, that is when a file goes on there, it's going to select those files. Now, we allowed multiple files to be on there. So it gets all of those files, and then we basically just iterate through each one of those files, and then we upload each one. Now, I have this method in here called verify file is image, movie, audio. It's really just a simple test, as we see down here, to see if it has one of these extensions. That's really all I did. It's not actually verifying those files. It's just looking to see that those are the extensions that are on there. Yes, there could be some issues with that in particular, like it's not actually verifying that it's a JPEG file and you might treat it as such. And yeah, perhaps there are some potential issues there, but overall I think this is a fairly solid solution. If you have another one or a better one, please let us know in the comments of this guide. And that next portion, then, if it is one of those items, then we just go ahead and upload it. Now, I have a comment out here for an alert, so if it's not one of those, then you can just set this alert, and then it'll have some changes. And then finally, after it handles all of those, it will clear out the value. So you can upload more, or more specifically, it doesn't look like it's still pending, right? So right here, it says no files chosen. If I upload some more, or even the same ones, it will upload those files and it will add them on here, right? So it actually added it onto here, and I can now choose some more, okay? If we scroll down a little bit more, we see this construct. Well, let's actually look at the file upload portion. So upload file, scroll down to the upload file function. Now this is where a lot of the logic is actually coming through. Now, first of all, we do a simple AJAX call, and that is posting the file name. So this is the actual file item. So to get those files, the actual items themselves, right? So we're actually doing it here. We're getting the file from the item itself. So selected files, this is getting the property of that input, and it's looking for each one of those files. And this is actually an array, which is also known as a list, but it's an array of selected files, right? So when we iterate through that array, or when we do a loop through it, we get an index item and then the actual file item itself. So this is actually the file itself, which you could test out with console log. So on that file, it has a name to it. So file.name or item.name will actually show you the file name. There's other things that are attached to it as well, which we'll see in just a moment. So if I scroll down just a little bit, we see file item.name. So that's giving us the actual file name from that uploaded item. And that's what we're posting to that policy, like we've already tested. And when we actually successfully do that, we set up the policy data. So this variable is declared here. We set it up here. And if there's an error or something like that, it will alert us, which we haven't had one yet. And then the next part is we're going to construct this form policy data. So we're taking the policy data that's returned to us from our API call, and then the actual file item itself, the actual physical item itself. So let's look for that method, and that was the construct form policy data, and that's this right here. So what this is doing is it's creating form data. So data that we're going to essentially append to our form that's going to allow us to do this AJAX call for the uploading portion. So notice my page did not reload. Like it doesn't reload. It's using all asynchronous loading. So if I hit open, the page didn't upload, everything went in there. Now this might be a little bit more clear if I'm uploading a video, for example. So let me just go ahead and do that. I'm going to grab a video for this particular one. And I'm just going to, I'm going to have to grab a different video. So Bootstrap Basics, I'm going to go ahead and upload this one. So this is actually uploading. It is It shouldn't be complete yet. It might actually be because there's probably a pretty fast upload, but let's go ahead and look. That's the most recent one. So it's item 20. Yeah, it's not quite there yet. So let's refresh. So if the upload process is not done, there's only 9 completed. It's actually still likely doing the progress on here. So we'll come back to that in just a moment. But essentially what this is happening is it's uploading this and it's allowing the page to not have to reload. So everything's working in the background asynchronously. So it's loading it up. This constructs the form in the way that AWS S3 expects. So this is where we're taking all of the policy sort of stuff, right? So we've got our file name, our actual file, the signature, the things that we created in that API backend. The access key as in the public key, not the secret key, and all that. So content type is going off of this. So it's either going off of the file item type or whatever the file is, or it's going to just stream it as an octet. So that's part of it. The URL, that's all built in the backend. So this is really just saying, hey, get all of that API data and let's construct it into our form. So when we scroll down a little bit, then we use XML HTTP request to send this to AWS. This part is rather important. So this is where we can actually upload it and handle the uploads and what is actually going on with those uploads, right? And we have this method in here for displaying this. So basically what I've got here is upload start. It's going to actually add it into the upload. And then we actually add in the request itself. So the XML HTTP request is often referred to as XHR. And that obviously stands for XHR. And I actually attached it to the file item itself. So the file object has this. Now this is to allow us to do other things with it. That starts to get a little bit more advanced, but I do like having it in here so I can use it later, such as displaying the item. So in here, I'm actually uploading this and I'm running the upload. This is where I'm actually doing the progress and updating that progress. Notice it says display items in here. So I actually have something specifically for display items. And then finally, once it's done, I can handle it, which I have commented out for a specific reason, which I'll talk about in a moment. But finally, after I actually set up these callbacks, so these are all event listeners, or well, with the exception of this, but these are event listeners that when these things happen. So when it's progressing, it calls this for every single item. When it's loaded, it calls this for every single item. So right here is actually calling it, right? So this is actually posting that data to where the policy data says, and then it's also sending it, or it's opening the request, and then it sends the actual request with that form data, which we already constructed. Okay, so this display items portion, if we go up here, this is actually displaying the items for us. It's showing us the progress as we want to see it. Now, in this case, it actually has a progress bar and it has some related Bootstrap stuff that we didn't actually add in to our content. So I'm going to actually let that leave with you guys. I want to see if you can actually update and do this display so this looks a little bit better. Notice that this one is completed. If I inspect the element in here, I see a div. I actually have something called progress, and it's actually giving me a value. So let's upload something else again. I'm going to do another one, which is now a new upload. I'm going to go ahead and inspect the element here. And notice these things are changing. So I'm just opening this up. And what we're going to see is some progress on that last one. Yeah, it's reloading the page every time. So we actually can't see it. You know, I did give you that challenge, but what I'm going to do instead is add in some Bootstrap CSS to our project. And I'm just going to put it above this block JavaScript. That's probably not the best place to put it, but I want to have that CSS loading. So I refresh the page. I hit choose files. And I'm going to go ahead and choose a new file. Hit open here. I hit it a few times. Sorry about that. Let's see. I have to cancel those out. Let's try that again. We'll select a file here. I'll hit open. And now, there we go. We actually have it loading. So it's showing us that loading process. Close actually doesn't work. We don't have a method to handle that. I didn't actually implement one, but you can. So that's something that you could be challenged to do, but the display item is actually displaying what's being uploaded. So if I uploaded a bunch of other videos, there it goes. It's actually showing that upload process for each one. So this is actually uploading those big files, which we'll come back to those in just a moment. So essentially what this display items does is it looks for what's inside of the loading queue, which we added, right? So we actually added in the loading queue here, right? And then we actually go through and display them based off of that. So I'm actually iterating through each time. This is probably not the most efficient way to do this, but it's a way that we found that works really well, at least for what we're trying to do here and displaying the progress. Now, if you're using something like Angular, this is a little bit easier. Now, even if you were using Angular, you would still be using this XHR request. So all of this data is still fairly valid for things like Angular and React. So you're going to still set it up in a very, very similar way. But this is code that is actually working. It's actually going to be uploading those things to the end where it needs to go. Now, the very final thing, the one challenge I will say pause right now and try this is that file upload complete. If we do a quick search, I actually have a method for it. So the reason I'm asking you to try this out is hopefully you know enough about Django to actually finish this off. Yes, there will be the actual portion of this in just a moment, but I will like to challenge you to say, hey, can you actually, update the backend that these things have been uploaded once they have been, right? So we have the display going, but can you update the background to show that? That is the thing that I'll leave you with for just a moment, and we'll be right back. So now what we want to do is add in our file complete upload handler. That is, once it's uploaded, we want to update our backend with some information about it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste in this view here. The spacing is a little bit off, so I'm just going to tab it back, and then we'll just do it on our own here. So we'll just tab this in and then tab that in. Okay. So basically what we're going to do is add this upload complete handler into our URLs then. And I'm going to just go ahead and copy this policy here right below it, call it files complete, and file complete upload handler, and then upload complete. The order of these two doesn't actually matter that much, but that's essentially handling that. The next thing would be uploading or fixing our jQuery to do the file upload complete. We have the function already set up, and I just need to take off the commented out portion of that. So I say that, and let's go ahead and test it out. Notice that these things are all updated and completed, but if I go in here, I don't actually see any of that. So any of these files I click on, they don't say uploaded or the type or even a file size. So now that I have that handler, I can actually do it. So I'm going to go ahead and upload all of these files. So there's 7 of them. They're not necessarily in order, but they are actually uploading right now. Go into my file items. I can see that any particular one is actually uploading. So I'm going to let these finish uploading, and then we will actually talk about the final portion of this. But as it's doing that, I do want to mention, if we look at this view, it's fairly straightforward. Yes, this could be improved 100%, but I just wanted to make something really simple and easy for me. And you might not use a post method. You might use put here actually for more appropriate methods as far as HTTP is concerned. But we're more concerned with just getting this stuff up and going. So we've got our file ID. So we're actually getting the ID from the file, like as in the object ID that we passed. So if we scroll down here, I actually have my file ID right there. So it's that same file ID. The reason we need that is so we can actually do some updating. The rest of it is like not even a thing if we don't have the file ID. File size, that's something we actually build in our upload process. So if we look at the file upload complete portion here, we actually get the file item and you can grab the size from it. So whatever is being uploaded, this is that same file item that we talked about already. And then of course the policy data has that file ID, so that's how I'm able to use that. And then finally uploaded being true, that it's complete, right? So it's done, so I can actually upload it. And then that's where we post all of this data. This lecture ID stuff, you don't actually need that, so don't worry about that. But then we display the items as in we update the items being finished, right? So it's done, so it's going to just re-display those items, signifying that it actually is done. Because if you wanted to change how your template worked or how it actually the display item looked like this stuff, you might have a different way of showing if the item is complete. That's completely up to you. Not going to really go into that portion right now, like as in the progress of that item. If it's at 100, you might change the actual rendering of that. And that's why we call this here. So there's definitely a lot of things that we could do to improve this, but for many of you, I would say that this is a really good start into building an upload process for yourself as well as for your end users. And since we're using Amazon's servers for the actual handling of these files, we don't have to worry so much about all of that setup process. The policy data, all of those things are actually doing a lot of the legwork for us there. Okay, so we actually have some finished here. Notice that I'm getting this console new loading is not defined, and that is because of this right here. Like I said, you don't have to worry about those things. So I'm going to go ahead and just comment that out on mine. But the rest of it should work, right? So I actually updated and completed these items. If I go in here and refresh on, let's see, let's actually pick one that probably is done. Nesting, that was the first one there. So let's maybe guess. I'm going to have to display this a little bit better so we can actually make better guesses. So I'll just change this, add a str in here, and we'll if self.name return self.name, otherwise we'll return the string of self.id. So we save that, refresh, and there we go. So let's see which one's done. Well, they're all done now, but nesting, let's go ahead and click on nesting. I've got my file size there. I don't have a file type. I didn't actually send that with the backend. You could, but notice uploaded is now there. And we can verify that it's uploaded by going into our console, just refreshing in here, going down to 29. And what do you know? There is 29. Perfect. So it actually works. It's fairly user-friendly. I wouldn't say it's the best displayed or styled, but it does work, right? I can actually upload things. There's a couple things that, yes, you can 100% do, and that is implementing this closeout function or this cancel function, and also preventing reloads, right? So when I reload the page, I don't actually have that prevention there. That I'm actually going to challenge you guys to figure out on your own and have that in the comments if you find a solution so other people can use it as well. I will say it has something to do with XHR. So that is something it does have something to do with. And then finally, the next real challenge that we have is downloading these things. So we've created a way to upload them, but how do we download them? That's going to be on a different blog post. So make sure you check out our blog, joincfe.com/blog for more of that. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.